This meeting is being recorded.
I think that's loud enough. So thank you all for joining us. Today, we want to talk about women supporting women. And it seems like, oh yeah, that should just naturally happen. And don't women do that all the time? Sadly, no. So we want to talk about why it's important, why this actually matters, and why what each of us can do for each other actually changes the game and changes the dynamics. So my name's Kimberly Page, just in case you are like, who is this talking? I am the CEO of Breaking the Glass, and I have some other executive women who I've worked with who are supporting me as we do this. So Kirsten, I want to introduce you first. Do you want to give it a quick background?
Sure. Hi, Kirsten Thayer. I live and work in Southern California. I've been in technology for 20 plus years. I work in product management leadership in the digital space. So fintech basically right now, but have spent many years in the entertainment side of things. And that's how I know Kimberly. Nice to meet you all.
Pleasure. Okay. Lexa, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Lexa Anderson. I've also been in technology like Kirsten for over 20 plus years, mainly in like software engineering and integrations, a lot of the digital transformations. 17 of those years have been in leadership. And I'm in Northern California, originally from Southern California. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. All right. And Sonia, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Gutierrez Mendoza, and I live in Central California. So you've got all parts of the states covered. I work from home. However, I work for a university that's based in Southern California, University of Massachusetts Global. So my office is in Irvine, but I live in Tulare, California. I've been in higher ed for over 25 years. But my job has a technical spin to it. So I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Admissions Operations for the university. And my job is to make sure that the technology related to a student applying to the university works. And then we process applications to admit new students.
Wonderful. So thank you. So we want this to be a very interactive session. So I'm going to start sharing some facts, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about these things. So one, please let me know when you can.
We can see your screen.
Yes, you can see it.
Wonderful. All right. Play nice with me today, PowerPoint. All right, so here's some interesting facts. In 2022, some of these things were a little surprising to me, that 58% of the workforce in the United States are women. 58.4% are women, but only hold 35% of senior leadership positions. What are your guys' thoughts about this?
I think it's interesting. I used to, a couple years ago, I was on kind of like a women's inclusion network. And this was a study that we had done before, is that entry-level workers are about 80% are women, but there's only 3% that are CEOs, right? So it's kind of like in this same thing, and it's so mind-blowing how like there's such a big gap in between the two. So I'm just like, you got to be kidding me, right? But yeah, it's definitely there. I've worked in it and seen it as well. So it's just crazy to me.
So I have a question about the percentages, particularly the 35%. So is it 35% overall? So that includes men and women, or if is it the 35% of the 58.4%? Because
No,
that
it's
kind of
35.
difference.
Yeah, it's 35% of 100%. So of all of the senior leadership positions in the country, only 35% of those are held by women.
Okay, so so that includes men and women. Okay.
Yeah. Any other surprises or thoughts about this?
I was just gonna
Well-
add, I know they're starting to add more, like in California, right, regulations where there's more diversity on, like, say, boards and specifically for females or in executive positions, but it's kind of just sad that it's taken that long. Or I think some of the work that is done is on the backs of the women that are supporting the executives that are getting the accolades for the work being done at the executive level. But I don't know if there's any stats specifically around that. That's just how, like, personally, I feel when I see folks in like corporations, you see like all the folks doing the work and then handing it off to someone to like then present it or share it. And it's usually like the males, that the counterpart, that get to do that.
I mean, it's either that or you're presenting it to the executive team, which is mostly men, not everywhere, but you're identifying the problem, you're identifying how to fix it, you're laying out the project plan of how to fix it, but it's the CEO or it's the president who's presenting it as if it were his own. So there's also that as well, because I have experienced that a lot. And they just kind of take, kudos for all of your work, which is entirely frustrating.
Yes, that is very unfortunate. And as we look to the next generation coming into the workforce, unfortunately, they don't give themselves credit and see themselves as leaders. So I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of students who are graduating from college or graduate school. And I had a client earlier this morning, and she's finishing up her master's. She's worked for 5 years, but she's just like, yeah, I need entry-level positions. And I'm like, why would you need entry-level positions? And she's like, well, I don't have everything that I need to be this role. And I'm like, why are you taking yourself out of the conversation and out of the equation? But it's so just natural, which is why we're talking about this and why we're bringing these things up, to get a different thought process and to get people to see that, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. For the Fortune 500 companies, it's even smaller. Only 8.8% of the Fortune 500 companies have women. And you know what? Women today have more bachelor's degree than men do worldwide. 41% of their women worldwide have their bachelor's degree versus 36%. But yet, look at the salary gap. So women with their master's degree had an average salary of $72,000, but men with their master's degree had an average salary of $117,000. That seems outrageous, but again, things are starting to change to make that different. For example, several states in 2023 now have laws in place where you have to put the salary range for the positions that you're applying for. So that's going to help say, hey, I'm only getting paid $72,000 for this role, but I'm looking now at the salary range and it starts at $110,000. Maybe I have not been asking enough. One thing, when you guys applied for jobs, especially years ago, did anyone used to see, tell me what you're currently making instead of what you're asking for the job?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%.
And yes, that question helped keep this in place.
Mhm.
Because if you're telling me what you're currently making, I'm not going to give you the salary range that the position is for. I'm going to just give you maybe a little bit more than what you're currently making right now. And so
Yeah.
that shouldn't be the case, but it still is not universal.
Yeah, I'm currently like going through the interview process because I just got laid off last week, right, or like 2 weeks ago. And it's so funny because I don't have a bachelor's degree. I'm self-taught. And then people say, okay, so what are you looking for, for this position? What is your expectations? And I always got trapped in that because I was like, well, if it's higher, right, and I say lower, well, then you're gonna pay me lower. So I ended up just turning back and asking a question and say, what is budgeted like for this position? And then I put it like back on them, and then they're like, well, it all, then so that's about the way that I figured it out. But yeah, I was shooting myself in the foot a couple times.
Kimberly, I know we're going to get to this in a bit, but I wanted to to piggyback on what Amber just mentioned, just to provide some information to the folks on this call today. So if you or someone you know has been recently laid off and you're looking for support, I cannot encourage you enough to join. They're actually free job search councils. There's an organization that I belong to that primarily focuses on people in digital technology, but it doesn't mean that it's limited to that. So the person who started this council that I belong to, which is a peer council that was started by a Harvard grad some years ago, he had established these groups, and the idea was don't do things alone, ask for help. And he put a book out maybe a couple of years ago. It just happened to hit right around during the pandemic, and it's called Never Search Alone. And it's about this idea of building a community. One of the things that he often talks about is not having, asking for enough, especially women.
Right.
And what are the sort of 4 key pillars that will help you? So there's nothing, there's no sort of financial win for him here. This is just sort of who he is. I'll include in the chat a link to, it's just phil.org. And if any of you are interested, you can feel free, you can mention my name if you want, as here's how I got your information. There is no obligation. There's no, what's the gotcha. They'll set you up with free services, which could include a job search council, training, support. And they're especially trying to target folks who've been laid off during, recently. There's a lot of people, especially in the technology space. So, so basically, yeah, if you have any questions, more than happy to respond after this. I'm not trying to sell something. It's just, I just got the email the other day. I was like, oh yeah, that reminded me. So
thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate it. Right. That's why we're here doing this, right?
Yep.
Yes, exactly. And Amber, one other thing that you can also check out, which is completely free, salary.com. So
Okay.
salary.com lets you put in the job title as well as the zip code, and it'll give you the salary range. And so instead of, because I know exactly how you feel of like, oh my gosh, if I put too much, they're automatically going to disqualify me for this position. So you can put the salary range in there. But hopefully, as you are applying to more and more positions that you see that salary range on there, you can see, okay, what it is, and then don't get trapped in, well, what did you make before?
Yeah. Well, I decided I was going to kind of do like both, and I was just going to start my own business and do consulting in my area. And then at the same time, just try to get other positions as a consultant under my FEIN instead of going and working for somebody. So then that way I can't get laid off again.
Yes, I completely get it. I understand that. Yeah.
But I'm doing both, trying to juggle building my own website, doing all of that in the midst of, looking for a job and everything. So it's been crazy, but so I'm taking any and every advice, like, yes.
I want to throw in something that I learned like midway through my career. And once I learned it, you don't unlearn it. And then you want to make sure everyone else knows it too. Some of the reason for the gap that we see between men and women is that when offered, so once you've figured out like kind of what the ballpark is or what you should be expecting as a new salary for a new job, let's say you're offered the job and you're offered a salary, almost always men will ask for more no matter what. They'll always say, they'll counter. And women will be so thankful that they got the job, they'll say, thanks, I'll take it. And if you start off, someone starts off $5,000 higher at the same job, over years, 2% later, 5% later, 7% later, the gap increases. And over time, the men are ahead because they simply asked for more from the get-go. So no matter what the situation is, when you're offered a job and you're offered a salary, ask for more anyway, because the worst they're going to do is say no. And if they say no, then you're at the place where they can afford you. And if they say, come back and say, well, we can give you a little more, then you're far better off than you were before you asked.
Yeah,
So
and just to
question
jump,
for Evie. Oh, go ahead, Alexa.
just to tag team on Sonia's, I think it's the counter is always a good thing, right? Wait your 24 hours and then counter. And then also ask for a signing bonus. There may not be one, but they may go back and say, oh, we didn't think of one, maybe we should give her one. And then to Amber's comment, because I'm recently in transition and I'm looking as well. And I've been asked that question early on in the cycle. And so I think as somebody seeking employment, it's always important for you to understand you're also interviewing that company to see if it's the right company that you want to join. So when I get asked early on, I don't want to be, out of the process if I say a number too high. So what I typically say what's budgeted for the amount, which is what you said. But then I'll also say things, well, it depends on, the team and the projects I'll be working on and the strategy of the executives and, like the community. There's all these other factors because the goal is to get through all the cycles and they love you. So at the end, the number doesn't become such an issue because they've already met you. But if you give a high number and they're like, oh, that's too high, that's not in our range, they just let you go and they stop you from proceeding at extra phases. So just a little tidbit of suggestion.
Another thing I wanted to jump onto that Kimberly mentioned earlier in coaching, I guess that was your graduate school person, is not even putting your name into the hat in the first place because you think you need to have more experience. And I know I've personally done this. I have personally not put my name into things, and I've had others say, you should do blah, 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 whatever that is, because they may see something that you don't, or you don't have the confidence that you've checked every box. And I have absolutely seen that time and time again between my male peers and my female peers, is that women feel like they have to prove more. And maybe you do, but you don't know if you don't try. So for anybody who's considering things and you're opting yourself out, it doesn't hurt to throw your name in the hat.
That is such an excellent point. So many people think that they need to have 100% of the job requirements in order to apply for a job. And I let them know if someone has 100% of the job requirements, they are considered overqualified. Does anyone know what the average percentage of qualifications on a job rec people have to get hired?
I would say like 30%. That would be a guess.
Anyone else?
I'm going to go with 60%.
It falls between 50 and 60%. So imagine if so my client this morning, she was just like, well, I don't, I only have 5 years and it's saying that it needs 8 years. Okay, but you have 5 years and you're bringing this to the table, and look at all of the things that you're bringing and all the skills that you have. And if you had 8 years, how satisfied would you be in this role? And so when we had that conversation and we flipped it like that, she was just like, oh, I am qualified. Yes, you are. And you want to grow into a position. You don't want to go into a position where you do know everything and have done everything. Then why, to Kirsten's point, are you aiming so low? We're supposed to raise the bar and go higher versus having the bar just stick us in the middle of the head so we can continue to grow and evolve.
Yeah, I've had a male CEO tell me like I needed to lower my standards. And I was like, excuse me? Did you just say that? I have to lower my standards? Like, we should be pulling each other up and all of that. But it was because I ended up knowing more than he did. And he was just like, oh, hold on a second, I'm the owner, right? Lower your standards, right? This is like kind of, we take these type of clients, and I was just like, wow, okay. I didn't even know what to say on it. I was just like, I'm sorry, but I don't lower my standards. So, but I was just kind of taken back by that as
I
well.
think that's a great sign though, Amber, of when you think about, just like anything, what's the fit? I think it was Lexa who was talking. I don't remember if it was Sonia or Lexa talking about you're interviewing them. So as you go through the process, before you start, or even if you're in the process, putting that list together of your must-haves and your nice-to-haves and your ideal profile of what is that company, and stick to it, because it is a buyer's market right now. There
Right.
are more jobs than there are people looking.
Right.
And so I recognize there's always the economics of I need to have money to pay my bills. But the hardest thing is getting on the spin wheel of I got a job, it isn't exactly what I wanted, it's paying the bills, and then you're out again 18 months later, as opposed to continuing to build up your credentials at a place and get more and more equity or salary. So
I
measure.
would tag on, sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
please go on.
Well, I just wanted to tag on to another thing to have set in order is your own personal values, because that's going to run a whole lot deeper. And if that organization doesn't align with your own values for how you live your life, it's not going to work out. I mean, you're going to experience a lot of guilt and stuff having been there. So I think it's also good to kind of have an idea or have lined up, okay, what are my own personal values? Does this organization line up with it? If not, that I'm not going to find fulfillment in working there. So I just wanted to tag that on.
I want
That's
to
an
echo.
excellent point.
Oh, sorry, Kim. I want to echo Ash. I literally just had an entire workshop with my staff, my current staff, not hiring, but my current staff on that exact topic. And we went through an exercise where they needed to identify their values and bump it up against the values of our organization to ensure that they're still in the place they need to be and that they're committed and happy to do the work that we do. Because we're a nonprofit, so our pay is not always the greatest reward, but the values are most important.
Yeah. And I think, trying to find some type of fulfillment in what you do. I mean, it's kind of a core part of being a human. You want to find work that is meaningful. Like you want to feel like your life means something, and so part of that, discovering and kind of aligning your values, you're going to find more meaning in that job, which means you're going to have more fulfillment in your work that you do. So you're not going to be dreading going to work or, going home feeling guilty because you're participating or working for an organization that doesn't align with how you live your life. So if you can try to align that, even if it's not all of the values, because the likelihood you'll find one that's absolutely perfect, is kind of slim. But if you do, along with what you want to see within the culture of that organization, their norms and all that stuff, you're going to find a whole lot more fulfillment in your job, which means if you have more fulfillment, you're going to work harder. You're going to be happier, and happy employees produce more, typically in less amount of time. So sorry, fulfillment is like a huge part of what I did when I was working on my master's with work. So
No, these are all excellent points, and why we are doing this and why we're actually talking about this. Because a lot of the times when you look at this graph, so the blue are the men and the teal are the women. Women are held to higher standards. So 33% of men say, no, they're not. 52% of women say, yes, we are. Businesses aren't ready to hire women in top positions. Again, 35% of men say, 50% of women say, yeah. Family responsibilities get in the way of running a corporation. Again, now that we have both parties mostly working, that's 20% to 26%. women have less connections, women are less likely to ask for a promotion. So question for the group. Please put in the chat if you have ever in your career asked for a promotion. Okay, I see several yeses. Okay, that's wonderful. Now, wonderful. A lot of the times, as you can see, women are not very open to ask for promotions. They're like, okay, well, I hope. And so again, the more that we can start changing this mindset and saying, you just have to take what's given to you. You don't deserve to ask for more, or you don't deserve to change the situation or change the dynamics, the more it's going to change for everyone. I like this one. Women aren't tough enough for business. Really? Are you are you sure? Because we deal with a lot in business and are still successful. So I think we actually deal with more. And then the last one is just outrageous. Women aren't good at being managers. Outrageous. So what are you guys' thoughts on how people are current? And this was again 2020, not 1950, not 1979, not 1999. This was actually done in 2020. So what are your thoughts and even concerns about these thought processes between men and women?
I don't know. I have a lot I could say about it, but I've heard that women are, too emotional to be leaders, right? When you're emotional, then you don't have good emotional intelligence, and so women shouldn't be in leadership. I remember I asked for a promotion one time, and it was all male executives. And then I got declined, even though I was expert in it. And then they hired somebody from outside with zero experience and then had me train them. And then they paid them $20,000 more a year. If that was not about a pill to swallow, right? But I knew exactly what was happening. But what was I going to do? I could leave and go somewhere else, but it was just like I wasn't qualified to do it myself, but I'm qualified to train this man, and he makes more money than I do. What's going on? I didn't understand it. So I've been a part of this. So I definitely understand. So it's kind of interesting. It's just like, what? Doesn't make any sense.
Well, I applaud you for sticking in there, because I don't stay quiet about stuff like that. So I've been like, this is
I stuck with the company for almost 9 years. So so I had
9
a
years
lot of
after this fact happened. Oh
Wow.
my.
yeah. So I had a lot of I've actually been told that I was, too pretty to be too smart. I was a woman, because I too was in the tech side developing a AI program, but it's of taxes, of employment taxes. And so a lot of people that I worked with, of different nationality and stuff, and no problem with that. But I was very stereotyped into being just this dumb, woman who shouldn't be in technology. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have any of that. So it was interesting.
Amber, have you worked in public companies?
Yes.
Interesting. I only say that because, at least in my experience, HR is your friend in those situations,
Yeah.
especially in a public company. And,
Totally. Yep.
I'm sure Lexa and I and Kimberly all have our share of stories related to that. And I would just say that's a lean in opportunity.
Hey,
Yeah.
I definitely understand. But yeah, that's just one of the many experiences over, the tenure almost, of all that, working so much and doing all of that. But I was more motivated, the more that they thought that I was dumb, the more that I was like, I'm going to learn more than you. And just, at the end of the day, and then they'd have to report to me. And at that time, these individuals with a different culture like didn't report to women. Women shouldn't be in the workforce, right? They need to be at home. So they were like, I'm not going to listen to you. Who are you to come in and tell me? But so it was a lot of challenge. I had to do a lot of growth. At the time, I was also relocated to LA. And I'm originally from South Dakota. And like, so to be in LA from South Dakota and deal with that traffic, like I had to learn a lot about myself and those drives. So I would listen to a lot of like motivational videos, or as I'm driving at 3 o'clock in the morning, just to kind of get you motivated. And because some days you'd come home and just crying because men can be very mean also, like in the industry. And I was like, so yeah, so I but then when I would see a woman, I'd be like, oh, hi, you want to be best friends? You want to go to lunch? So yes.
Amber, I can understand your frustration. Unfortunately, I was promoted to a director position, and we had a temporary CEO or CIO who would not speak directly to me because I was a woman. And he would come in and speak to the people who reported to me, who are men, and say, I need you guys to tell her this. And I'd be standing in the same room. And so I understand some of the frustration with the outrageous behavior that can actually still happen today and not accepting it. So one of the things that I did was I went to HR and spoke with them. And I also went to a male colleague and shared with them what was happening, and that situation got replaced. That person got replaced. But if I had just accepted it, it would have still been that way. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard and it's difficult. And the more that women can support each other and say, that is not okay. Because years later, I was in a different situation. I was at a different company, and I was working for one of the female leaders. And she was one of the few executive women at that company. Most of them were men. And so we were sitting in a meeting, and after the meeting, she said, come here, let's have a conversation. She says, that person doesn't like you, and you're going to have to be bringing the data and really making sure that you are bringing your A+ game, because if you don't, that person is coming after you. And thank God she did that, because if she hadn't done that, I would not have been successful in that role. And the fact that she did that, I was actually promoted shortly after because I was bringing my A game, and and she's just like, I need you not to be afraid to take credit for the things that you've done in a meeting. And she said, other people are going to take credit for what you're doing instantly. So I need you to take credit for what you've done. And again, that has been extremely motivational to me, because I would look in this meeting and I'm with all of these different executives, mostly who are men who have never seen a woman do this. And I see a little smile in her face, like, and so little tiny things like this can change this metric, right, and can make this difference. And it makes someone else not have to walk in the shoes that you and I have had to in the past. Right. Has anyone else had, unfortunately, similar experiences to what Amber and I have shared?
Well, I know we were talking on our prep call last weekend about this a bit about, who's been there as an advocate and who hasn't. I don't remember where the thread had started, but was surprised at the number of women who were actually sort of the counter, that were not supportive and outright almost, you had to worry about the knife in your back. So I'd say there were unfortunately more of those that help to sabotage it for other women than there have been advocates. So we've talked about this too, like that you've got to read the room and learn who is going to be an ally. You can always be diplomatic, but you've got to find those people that you recognize, one, they're going to help you, and vice versa. And I definitely have people, I wouldn't call them my own managers. I've had more men help me than women that have been my leaders. But I now am seeing more of it as I've moved up into more senior leadership, women in roles outside of my department or my division who see how few of us there are once you get above director that are in roles, and it's an important community to keep.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's just
One
a
thing
story.
I found that if you have a particular woman who is continually stabbing you in the back, or they're taking your work, they're making your life miserable, if you are working as an ally for your other employees, and I'm speaking from experience, they hate you even more because you're gaining the other employees' respect, because you're calling out how they're being mistreated. And it was to the point I had to leave the company because I was too outspoken. And the person who shoved me out was the lady who was continually coming after me. So be
I'd
careful.
say at the end of the day, you're gonna experience these in any place you work, and politics are politics no matter where you are. I think as a woman, we unfortunately, my sense of this is at least there's a bit more work in having to understand who is going to be an advocate, because whether it's a man that's threatened or a woman that's threatened, I've seen poor behavior in both. I think the purpose of this, certainly, Kimberly putting this together, is how can we make sure that we're helping people stand on the shoulders of our success? And how do we help groom people to, take those chances and reduce that gap that she showed on the prior slide?
Well,
Absolutely.
one of the things that actually came out of it was I worked with a couple of the ladies who I was typically defending, kind of help them start looking for other jobs. I have a degree in IO psychology. And so a lot of it was encouraging them that you can leave, you can do more. And both of them have left. They can now work from home and be with their children and things like that. And they're making much more money. They are being respected more. But when they first started out, they were so beat down that they didn't think that they could. So it took a lot of work, but just the fact that you built that rapport because you're always defending them, you're always coming and you're helping them and checking in on how they were doing and supporting them, they started to believe that I can do this. And so it just, some of the outcomes you never know if you just try to be an ally to whoever you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And Suda asked a great question. How do you know who's an ally versus who's an enemy? And so I think the first thing is starting to build that relationship with that person, like going above and beyond and saying, hey, hi, how are you doing? Trying to get to know that person. Also, building trust. So let's say, for example, Suda and I have worked together. So let's say, Suda, you and I are in a meeting together, and after the meeting, you share something with me. And you're like, hey, please don't share this. I'm concerned about X, Y, and Z. Well, if after that meeting and session you hear people say, oh yeah, Suda is worried about X, Y, and Z, and she doesn't know, you can start to know that that person is not going to be your ally. That person is actually going to fall onto that enemy side. So you have to be able to trust that person first and foremost, be able to have those open lines of communication, and being able to have similar goals. Hey, you and I are both here to do a good job. And you and I are both here to, not only just do this role, but to rise up in this organization and rise up. And so when people have similar goals, similar things that they want to do, it's more likely than not that you guys can align. But again, if that person doesn't have the same goals as you, for example, if they see you as a threat or see you as a competition. So let's say you're in a position and you're like, hey, you know what? I want to be the next CIO. And she's like, well, I've been lining up for that next CIO position for the last time. Okay. So again, that's probably not going to be an ally of yours. That's going to be more of someone who's looking at you as competition versus someone who is their counterpart. What are your thoughts about that?
I would also add to that, watch when things change in an organization. Pay attention to the cues that other people give when a change occurs, because when a change occurs, that's your greatest opportunity to see if someone was a consistent supporter or if they were supporting because the conditions were right. And when the conditions changed, the support changed. Because I've had that happen to me, where a decision about how our division was going to run in the future was made, and a person who was on my team completely shifted. And then it became a battle between who was going to be the leader.
Right. There was a question I think I saw from Sudha about identifying allies. And I think that's a really important topic, if you're okay for us to cover, Kimberly, because if we're thinking about like what tools are we giving people in their toolkit, I think that might be useful discussion, but I'll defer to you because I know you're the one managing the time and the agenda.
Yeah, no, that's what we were just talking about, just to make sure
Yeah.
that we can understand who is your ally versus who is your enemy or who's seeing you as
Well,
competition.
Sorry, and then maybe the way in which I was sort of interpreting the question or the responses I was hearing from others on that, I was thinking more frameworks for what are ways to help build a community, not necessarily, yeah, like, and certainly the example that you gave, Sonia, I've experienced as well, where people shift with the wind based on who's in charge and what's opportunistic. I've often found the best breeding grounds for allies maybe is setting up one-on-ones with people who you see how they act and admire, and doing some get to know them situations and opportunities, and try to set up an ongoing cadence with them. And you'll be able to learn. I wouldn't necessarily expose yourself and, be super vulnerable about everything initially, but just doing a listening tour to learn about other people is a great way to learn about who might be somebody who I can share stuff with, is willing to talk about things that are of interest to you. So that's where my head was when I was saying that, Kimberly.
Yeah.
I'll tag team there too, Kirsten, because I was thinking the same thing, like Sudha's asking, how do I know? So like if you're in a meeting, people that ask like well-intended or positive questions versus someone that's like kind of attacking you, like saying like, well, what's the data behind that? How do you know that? That might not be the same tone than somebody that's like, that's a great point, Sudha, great job. Just anything positive, encouragement, that automatically could lean into someone that's an ally, and they're just more positively engaged. They tend to even check on you, like, how are you doing? It could be small chit chat that they don't have to, right? They're walking down and they see like 10 folks at desk and they talk to just a few. That's another indicator of like, there's something there, and you can probably grow that relationship and turn it into somebody that's an ally. But I agree, Kirsten, I think those like frameworks of like, how do you identify? Because if you're new in the company, you may not recognize those things.
And I think now that we're also in many folks are in fully remote situations, or they may be in hybrid. So in those situations, if your interactions with people are limited, there are ways that you can create opportunities for this. As an example, and this is what I'm not saying you need to do this, but within your department or organization, you can say, hey, here's a great way I've learned from other places. We can set up this sort of coffee chat, and you put a schedule together using, something like a golf app that just does pairings, and say, all right, great, here's a schedule of all the people. They can do this on their own, but it's an excuse in some respects to help you get to know all these other people in the department, and gives you a way to not only get exposed, but also show some leadership there of helping to build camaraderie. I have seen that work well, not just for me personally, but just in building peer relationships if you don't have a lot of exposure to other people in your org.
I always
Yeah,
refer to it, I'm sorry, I always refer to it, or when I'm first meeting people, as it's a partnership, right? It's an internal partnership. And usually when you start to say that, right, you're going to get like this indication of somebody who really wants to work with you and somebody who is kind of like, like, so I always use that word all the time of like a partnership, right? You do you, and like, and then we come together and, and then try to find like some common ground and all of that and then you start to see who does what well and try to bounce off each other's skills and stuff. But I think when you try to meet people like that and let them know, like, hey, it's not just you, it's not just me, we're in it together. Then I think you can start to understand more people easier. So that's just what I do.
Awesome. So Sudha, what are your thoughts about it? I saw your chat, but any other thoughts or questions for everyone?
It sparked when Kristen and when when they was talking about it. We are having our first on-site next week, and I'm going to see there's out of 45 people, there are probably 5 or 6 women. So I was thinking maybe I can connect with them and maybe tell them that maybe we can connect every week, meet half an hour. They merged 2 teams, and it's just one big, fully male, almost all data science team. And there's very few ladies, and I'm going to talk to them for the first time next week. So maybe I can establish a connection and support each other, because I have no idea what they're working on, and I would love to learn from them. So maybe I can establish a connection there.
Yeah, that would be good.
Oh, go ahead, Kimberly. I'm sorry.
One thing that we did is because when Sonia and I worked together, there was very few women in leadership roles. And so what we did, and I still love this to this day, was we would have sangria night. And we would all get together as women and we would just talk about, hey, what's it like to be a leader? How can we support each other? How can we bounce different things off? And I'm not saying you have to do sangria, but just a way to connect and say, hey, you and I are in the same boat. And you and I are facing similar challenges, and you and I can support each other as we face these challenges and help each other grow in this process.
That's beautiful. I can phrase that and connect to them next week when I see them in person. Some of them I just know them by their name. I've not even had a conversation. But next week I'll get a chance to talk to everybody, and that's a great idea, Kim and Christian. Thank you, and Lisa.
I still love the sangria nights.
Yeah. I had one other question, Sudha. How comfortable do you feel asking whoever is the manager that's leading this group to establish some way to help you all do some type of team building or getting to know one another? It can't be lost on them that if you're finally going back into a more of a hybrid situation, you're not the only one probably looking for this. And it is generally up to leadership to offer up and provide these things. You even asking, there's no shame in that. And frankly, I encourage you to. So
we're still going to be fully online, but it's just people are coming from all over the country for just 2 days, and just on site for 2 days, and we're all going to go back, everybody from wherever they are. But they do have team building. They used to have it once a month, at least, the games and stuff, which was very interactive, and I liked it, but they stopped. So maybe I can suggest that we bring it back.
Yeah, I think suggesting those things and bringing them back, and even, I've had teams who are all over the country doing some like a happy hour where we just sit and talk every other Friday, or, those. I will send a link to several virtual team events as well, because there's different ways that you can work together as a team and connect with each other, even if you guys are not sitting with each other. And those are just little things. And even setting up, like if you guys are on Slack or something like that, your own chat group. So you guys can chat with each other and ask each other any questions, or like, hey, what did you think about this? Or yeah, let's set up a chat. Like those are just small little things to do to start building that bond and building that support.
So one thing that I did without any like purpose of it, remember I was telling you when I moved to LA, I was commuting for 2.5 hours each way. And I would get to work and I would hear like a really good motivational video that morning. And I'd get to work and I would be telling people about it. And then all of a sudden I was like, hey, I was like, hey, I read this really good thing, or I heard this really good thing, and I'm really pumped up today, and let me send it to you. Well, what ended up transpiring was I had like 50 some people now on a group text that every morning they wanted the daily motivational video that I chose to ride in with. And and that was one little small way to bring us together without it being outside of work hours, without really discussing work itself, but just being really motivating. And then it was funny because I ended up teaching to make my commute faster. I ended up deciding I was going to teach myself how to ride a motorcycle so I could commute faster. And so I did that, and then everybody's like, hey, wait, where's our daily videos now? And I'm like, oh, it doesn't take me that long. I got a bike now. So I'm listening to my music. But the whole thing is then somebody stepped in and volunteered to be the one to continue that group on. So that was just one way that we bonded as women, of being in a man dominated, environment. So
Well,
even
no,
in
that's excellent.
even in being in
Excellent.
the motorcycle world, women are not very liked over here. I just have to tell you that we are not. So, but I just position ourselves right along like, hi, vroom, vroom.
That's great. That's great. And you kind of answer some of the questions. Why should women support each other? We share the same struggles.
Yep.
We are, and when we looked at some of those slides, hey, we are trying to get in and be successful and change what that definition of success is. Not success in a men's eyes, but success in everyone's eyes. There's power in numbers. So when it's one person against the company or one person against the department, it's much harder to invoke change versus when several people are together and saying, you know what, we think we need to do this differently. Or, you know what, we're not going to accept this behavior anymore. It becomes rewarding. I know sometimes, and I joke with my staff, that mama bear comes out, especially if my staff is not being treated correctly. And they know, they're like, oh, mama bear is going to come out. Yeah, it's in our nature to nurture. And so if you're going to treat my staff not well, get ready. Get ready. She's coming for you. So it is in our nature to be nurturing. And accountability, not only holding ourselves accountable, but holding other people accountable for treating us how they need to. That I think is a big difference. When people look at accountability, they're like, oh man, what do I need to do? No, no, no. How are you ensuring that you are getting the respect and admiration that you deserve, and other women are getting the respect and admiration that they deserve? And that's a big perspective change. And when we start looking at all of these things, these are game changers. And when more than just one or two women do these start to fundamentally change the landscape that we're all working on. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about these.
I'll tag team on the nurture part. I think, having strong people around you and females, of course, but I think having that cheerleader in your corner that's telling you, like, right before you walk into that presentation, like, you got this, the content, you're going to be great. And just giving you that little support that you need. And then naturally you appreciate it. So then you go out of your way to try to give that support to someone else. And I think, we don't have a lot of cheerleaders. Like, we're just trying to do the best that we can with what we have. But other, like, men have a lot of cheerleaders on their side. And so I think the nurture part of, like, being someone's cheerleader goes a long way with just a simple, like, you've got this presentation, or that was great, or you're going to be fine, you're going to kill it in the, in the boardroom. Things like that are really helpful.
Absolutely.
And I think, Lexa, to your point, hey, if you're nervous, let's practice. Let's go into the boardroom and you can give me the speech and we'll help you practice. Like little things like that make a huge difference. What is anyone else's thoughts?
I wanted to piggyback off of Lexa, as well as there is when you have here, there's a power in numbers. Just knowing that I have to go out in the field where one, you're a woman, and then just going into places where men, just people don't even expect a woman or to even walk into. And then you have to, and then I have the authority. So I've had to learn how to like not take no for an answer. So that's like that has made me one of my strong suits. Like, doesn't matter what they say, we're gonna get through that. And I don't take no for an answer. However, it's like that power in numbers to be able to go and have another woman to, support you in that. It's like, okay, let's get a strategy, or just to debrief with another woman about, how this person made me feel, but you were still strong, you still made it through, you were, great. So for example, I had one of my managers came out and hadn't been out in years, and she had witnessed me not taking no for an answer. And she was just kind of surprised, like, wow, Tracy, you were so professional at doing this. So that really helped, really encouraged me, because I don't usually have that in my field. I'm all around men the whole time. I'm walking into the business and it's a man. Then I'm working with, all of them are men. So to have her that day, just step back and it's like, wow, you really took, you were so professional. You could have did it this way. But you were very professional, very communicative with the people, and you were successful. That was rewarding. And that nature, nurturing me came out. So I just felt really good leaving that situation in my work, being able to have another woman, it's like really seeing like I can see all the things that you had to go through to get to this point. And then you were so respectful about it. And sometimes that's not expected of us. Like, she's going to be emotional, or she may start crying, or she's going to get loud with the people, and to do the same exact opposite of what is expected. So everything that you have here is just definitely needed and supportive. But to have the other women in support, so that power in numbers is really big for me. So I hope that helps somebody.
No, it definitely, I just want to echo that. When there are numbers, like I loved, because of our Sangria group and other women leaders, I was able to say, okay, yes. And then I went to a company with no other women leaders. And so having the power in numbers and saying, yes, I have support, I have help, to going to nothing is dramatic. And it can be very, if you don't have that support to go back and lean to, and don't have a network to build, to lean on, it can become very hard. And you'll feel like you're stuck by yourself, and you're not. And this is exactly why we're doing this. We are not by ourselves. We are all here to support each other. And the more that we can learn from each other, and the more that we can share, this changes the game. And yeah, it might just change the game for us right now, but consider the impact and influence each one of us has. And if we all start doing that, imagine how powerful this can become.
Go ahead. I was just going to say that in just hearing what Tracy was saying, a couple things popped into my head as a yes and Kimberly. Some of us are in positions now where we're involved in the hiring decisions of other people. And one of the things that I have absolutely seen as a shift, at least in public companies, I can't speak for the private, for private, is this acknowledgement and need to move into DEI and making sure that the hiring ratios are what they need to be. And it's not just, I used to hear it, but now I'm seeing it. And so I have other women leaders who 10 years ago, if they were pushing back and saying, you don't have enough women leadership in the company, they would be seen as shrill and this sort of outlier. I think we're now at a point where it's okay. And I've done this with some of our, VPs and SVPs to say, hey, I love your team. I'd love to see a woman on your team too that I can work with. And I've seen a shift. And so even if you're not in a hiring position, you have more influence than you know, and expecting it and demanding it. Like in Kimberly's situation, I don't know if you have any ability to say, wow, where are all the other women? I think you need to have some, because there's not enough of a balance here, and it doesn't reflect our world. So I'm just saying, you all have more power than you think.
I used to tell people, because they, the men would gang up on me, and they would try to do the power and the numbers against me. And so I would just, tell them, I'm like, hey, I know I'm on an island by myself, and I'm okay with that, because I don't expect you to know how to row the boat to like get over to my island to understand, right? So you guys are on your island, I'm on my island, and that's okay. Right, we just got to figure out how do we like then transfer goods between each other. But that would be like my comeback to them, was be like, hey, I'm on a different page than you, and you guys don't understand it, and you're not going to attack me. I'm not going to let you attack me, but instead I'm just going to say I'm over here by myself, and I'm okay with that. I think that would get me a lot of respect within the men, instead of just kind of being quiet, shuddering, and then not, because I also don't want to be argumentative and and just keep going back and forth, and so you kind of get a middle ground first, throw a little laughter in it, and then have fun. So
Yeah, no, that's definitely excellent. And again, one of the things that is often heard is, our women are too emotional or too quiet. Are you going to go cry about this? Are you going to get in a big upset? No, I can manage my emotions. That still doesn't change the fact that you need to respect me, and you need to treat me the same way that you treat your peers. So just being confident and having those conversations. And you might have to speak up for other women who are not able to have those conversations. But the more that we do it, the more that the situation holistically changes. All right. So how can we do this? I think this is something that's really important, because this is some of the ways that we can start changing the game. And we don't have to do every single thing on this list every single day. Like, okay, I'm at 7. Okay, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. I got to get 8, 9, and 10 done. No, but it's important to start to recognize, what can I do? How can I start to implement some of these things into my daily activities, so women can feel supported by me, I can feel supported by them? And then as we start to look at that next generation that's coming up, how can we start changing that game from them saying and taking themselves out of the equation, or, oh, I'm just an entry level. How can we start doing these things? So celebrate her successes. So we were talking about cheerleading. How nice is it to hear someone say, good job? And it doesn't have to be in public. You can send an IM and say, hey, great job in that meeting, or send an email. Actually paying attention to what's being said, listening actively. So how many people have been in a meeting, especially with Zoom now, your camera's off, so you don't even know if they're awake or even paying attention. But hey, or they don't have their phones, or they're not doing that. But imagine if you're having a meeting and they have their camera on, and they're nodding their head, and you can see that they're paying attention to you, and they're unmuting and commenting. Little tiny things like that make a difference. Help accomplish goals. Like, hey, I see you're struggling with this, or you're working on this. I've done this before. Here's some ideas I have. Starting to get to know each other and get excited about similar things. Being that one who says, oh, I need support, or I need to ask someone for help, something like that. Being that person at that company. And then talk about, hey, if you need to practice doing this, let's do that. One thing that I've helped both men and women with is role playing. And I think Suda can attest to this. Sometimes we are in challenging situations. I'm like, oh, I don't know how we're going to do it. All right, let's role play. I will put my hat on. What role am I playing? I'll be there to support each other. So when that situation does happen in real life, okay, I've done this before. It's going to be okay. I'm going to make it through. But just being very aware of the influence and impact that you can have on others that are around you. So I want to get your thoughts on these. Has anyone used these techniques or looking at these techniques saying, ooh, I want to start doing that?
I think the role play comment is really important because if you don't practice it, it can't, the first time it comes out of your mouth can't be when it's like the critical moment, when it has, you know, when, whatever it is, it's an interview or whatever it may be. I was in a play several years ago, and one of the techniques that we used in moments before we hit the stage to do the very opening act is we would say our first lines really fast to each other to get them just off our lips, so that when we were out there, it wasn't the first time rolling off of our, you know, rolling out. It was like, okay, we already did a dry run, like we're good, we've got this. And I think it's important. My son's swim coach always used to say, practice makes permanent. It doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. So the way you practice it is the way you're going to do it. And you find those ways to improve. But that practice piece is so important so that it gets the jitters, the nerves, or whatever it may be out and away so you can focus on the content of your conversation or interview or whatever it is that you're preparing for.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
I'll jump
What are
in.
other thoughts? Okay.
This is Lexa. I think depending on where you are in your career, I think when you give kudos to other people on your team in a room that they're not in also helps them, right? So like if you're presenting a deck and then you're like, you know, well, actually this statistic came from Isabella, who did research on my team, who is very passionate about it. Then other people start to hear, you know, you say their name or your name being said, depending on the example. But I think, and then the practice one, I cannot stress how important practicing is. It just becomes so much easier when it's time to actually say what you need to say. And you may feel silly doing it, but just do it. And if you could do it in front of someone, then that's even better. But if you can't just do it in preparation, it really goes a long way.
As a yes and to Lexa, I had a manager once who was basically saying that the rule of thumb of 10, at least for presentations. So there's the prepping for a difficult conversation, role playing, which I think is as important. But if you're also have one sort of bite at the apple to present in front of a group of people, whether it's your manager or others, just doing a rule of 10 and doing it in front of a mirror and recording yourself, it will help you remove a lot of, you can shed a lot of the verbal pauses, the shifting of your stance, and all those types of things that help them see the best version of you. The other thing that another person does with me often is we will give each other feedback after a discussion, just to say, how'd that go? What was your take? And it's sort of that immediate feedback loop of, I probably would have said this instead, or don't forget that, but this was great. And it just helps to kind of allow you to continue to edit your narrative when you're talking about a subject. So those are kind of things I keep in my back pocket.
Awesome.
Can I piggyback off something Kirsten just said? It's feedback is so important and we have to be open to it. We can't take it as a criticism. In most cases, the person that you trust to give you feedback is going to help you sharpen your skills. And the other thing I want to mention is either learning or teaching techniques on how to do things. And I love what Tracy was talking about earlier, and it made me think of, I have a particular way I say no to things that I'm asked to do in a respectful manner that is not a hard no. I have learned to say, thank you for that opportunity, but this time I need to pass on it because of whatever. And they're not, people aren't used to hearing you just pass something up. It's usually like, yes or no, are you in or not? And it's like, well, it's a great opportunity, but I have to pass at this time. And I had a friend of mine, she's female, she's a teacher, lives down the street. And she came back, I had mentioned it to her once upon a time, and she came back and said, I want to thank you for teaching me the technique of how to say no in that way, because I keep getting dumped on by my principal. And I figured out by saying that, I learned how to navigate the no in a way that showed respect, showed you were interested, but that it just didn't fit on your plate at that time or with your priorities.
Kimberly, I don't know from a timing perspective if we're okay on this. So I think what Sonia just mentioned was so important. And I think probably, especially in the roles you and I've been in, when it's in product, you often are being thrown out a lot of ideas from people that are in senior positions. So you may not be in a position to say no. So as a yes and to Sonia's, another thing that I have found that's been very useful is you go, great, yeah, we'll look at that, no problem. And then you come back with whatever information you can to arm you and say, you know, we thought the same thing, but surprisingly, here's what we've learned. And it's a way to allow them to save face, but still present data back to them that hopefully kills the idea that you knew wasn't something you should be doing in the first place. So just another thing in your back pocket.
Yes, and it's okay to not have the answer immediately available. And I think that's something that we get kind of trapped on. Oh, they need to answer right now. And it's okay, to both Sonia and Kirsten's point, to say, let me get back to you. Let me look into that and I'll come back once I have data, once I have more information to say, yes, this can be done, or no, it can't be done. So giving yourself permission to say, you know what, I don't have to know everything and have the answer for everyone all of the time. It's okay. Any other thoughts about these items? Is there one item that resonates with you more than others?
I would have to say like number 5 resonates with me about educating girls and young women to support them. I have 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls, and they're all out of the house now. And the lowest 2 are girls. And I try to raise them to be like, that's your best friend. That's, you know, another woman, regardless outside of it. But then just teaching them their own empowerment. Like, it doesn't matter how old they are, like they still have a voice. And to stick up for other girls. Maybe there's other girls that are getting bullied at school or something, and they need to one, stop it, right? However, and, you know, take action, then be there for the person as well. And then, you know, be the friend, because, you know, not everybody has the same life and people are all going through so much stuff. So I've always raised my girls, I mean, even my boys too, but definitely my girls, to really be inspiring. I mean, so much that it ends up backfiring on me, right? Like my daughter, I'll, you know, say, no, we can't have it, or, you know, it's just too much. I can't, I'm not doing this, I'm doing that right now. And then she'll just be crying and you told me to never give up when time gets hard and rough. And I'm like, what? You know, because I'm trying to tell her, like, we can't do this, it's too hard right now. And she'll throw it back in my face and tell me, like, hey, and then she holds me accountable, as like being that, as a young woman, and you know, holding me. So I'm really big on growing younger women and keeping that, like, you got it, man, you're our future.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Amber, for sharing. Anyone else have any that resonates well with you?
I love the last one, give authentic compliments. I feel like if you see somebody shining in something, if you tell them, then that's going to really help them. And I feel like one compliment that I got a while ago, I felt that kind of changed my life, because I didn't realize that, oh, I was good at that. I didn't realize. And I feel like that is really good. That is really good to pass, and you could be changing someone's life.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and to tag team on Suda's comment, you can give a generic compliment, right? Like, oh, that was a great job. But to give like an authentic compliment, like, Suda, I really liked when you talked about data points X, Y, and Z. It really resonated. Like that just feels like, wow, I really got them. They listened to me. It was important enough. So like authentic compliments, adding that more detail than just like you did great always helps someone that's on the receiving end of that compliment.
Perfect. Any others? I think one of the things that is kind of touching to me the most is be the woman that lifts other women up. Because I have been, I'm sure all of you know, have had some hard times. And just getting past those hard times, I would not have done it without someone reaching their hand to me and saying, hey, I got you. I support you. I'm here for you. And so if I can be that person for others, that means that I am helping change the game. And making someone who's like, oh my goodness, I've had those, okay, I'm gonna rock in the fetal position and cry in my bed all day type of situations. And to have someone else just be there for you to say, okay, let's dry your tears. Come on, we can get up out of the bed. It's gonna be okay. You're going to make it. Is just life changing. And you don't realize how just simple, small things have such a big impact on others. And so the more that we can do to help each other, the more that we can bring this insight for each other and help others as we see them rising, I think again, it's going to start changing that game dramatically. Any other thoughts about these items? Or anything that's not listed that you're like, ooh, this is another way that women can support each other?
One of the things that I often find is, and we've seen this in each other, you always recognize, hey, here's their strengths, but then you can also see, here are the things that we know if they really work on this, it's going to help them. It's often easy to pick those out and it works against somebody. And being able to be honest, I guess it does go back into this idea of being authentic, but authentically in saying, hey, I noticed something that is maybe an anchor holding you back. And I care about you enough to say, I want to help you, happy to, provide support, but these are some thoughts. And ideally a manager's doing that, but if they're not, who's going to do that for them? So that's often what when I sort of bring people in under my wing, it's because they are not getting that from a manager. They're not getting the honest feedback. They'll just get the great job, kiddo. You're like, okay, what am I supposed to be working on? So that's
I think that's such a great point. For example, it's almost been like 20 years, several years ago, a couple decades ago, I got wonderful feedback from Sonia. And we were in a meeting where she reached out to me and she said, you know what? Sometimes you're very negative. Sometimes you're just talking about the negative perspectives and negative things. And if I wasn't open to feedback and I didn't feel that she trusted me, I'd be like, oh, what is she talking about? Forget that. But I recognized where she was coming from. And then I looked and I was like, ooh, wow, I can be very negative. I'm always looking at the glass as half empty and talking about that half empty glass. And so I still thank you, Sonia, for saying that to me, because now people are like, oh my gosh, you're all positive and optimistic. And I'm like, wow, things have changed. And I wouldn't be where I am today without feedback like that. And so again, authentic compliments, authentic feedback, all of these things can be supportive for each other and allow each of us to grow. So thank you, Sonia. So I'm not that negative Nancy anymore.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, but that fundamentally changed me. So thank you. And, again, saying thank you to people who've supported you, thank you to all of these things also helps reinforce, hey, that actually did make a difference. What I said was important. They do value the feedback, in my opinion, and what I'm bringing to the table. All right, anything else before we wrap up?
I wanted to say, number 8, I know Kirsten had mentioned earlier about being in a leadership position. So a lot of times I know I take on mentees as in being in leadership, and I find I've taken on mentees that I don't even know I'm mentoring them, but people watch you. They watch you. And so recently I had I went out with one of the new young ladies, and it was a couple of years, pre-pandemic, and went out and did some recruiting with her, and she just got a promotion into my division. And she was like, you know what, you were the one who motivated me to get this position. I'm like, really? You're like, really? Like, what did I say? But she just having that conversation with her, but also walking in what I was talking about, so you never know who's watching you. Like I say, having mentees, and you don't know that they're mentees, but in leadership, you're going to take on, people that are watching you, especially women. So being specific on how you can help. It's one thing of just like, oh, I'm here and it's my manager and this is my duty and job, versus, what, I see something really in you that we can work on. And if, do you want to be promoted? What is your career goals? I can kind of support you on that. If you, be specific in helping. And if we have and if we're in a position to really elevate and help other women get into another space, then I think we really should work. That's really important. Even if other women in your field or in your department or that's coming alongside of you, they may not even say anything. But just having, being specific on how you can help other women in any aspect of work or, outside, I think that's very, very important. So that's one of the things that I really try to be authentic when I'm connecting to other women. It's just being specific on what I can do and to help. And it's helped me when other women have done that for me. So that one's big for me.
Thank you for sharing, Tracy. That's a good one too. Very good one. Well, I want to thank each of you for joining us today and really sharing your thoughts and feedback on this, because this touches all of us. And if you need help with this and building your confidence, we can help you. Kind of like to do this. Kind of like to do this on the side to help people go through this. So thank each and every one of you. We'll share this recording. So if you want to share this with other leaders, or if you want to review it again, we'll post it on the site, and we'll also share the information via, what is that thing? Oh, Facebook and some other things. So we'll share that link. Any other thoughts or questions before we go?
No, thank you for hosting and inviting and all of that. So I believe I ran across this on LinkedIn. Is that right? So thank you for posting. Otherwise I wouldn't have even known it was out there. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for coming. I hope this was beneficial to everyone.
Oh yeah, it's always good to see you're not like in the same box, because sometimes it can seem like you're, like going crazy. Like, what? Is it me? But, no, it's not.
Awesome. Well, our next, this isn't our last in our women's empowerment session. So we have another one next month. And that one is going to be focusing on, and I think we heard it a few times today, is, managing your emotions. So instead of having to worry about, oh my goodness, they're going to say that I'm too loud or getting upset or, oh, she's crying again, teaching you how to manage your emotions. So that's March 18th at same time. And so we'll send out information about that. But if you want to sign up now, you can go back to our website and register for it. We'd love to have you there. And please share this with other women who you think could benefit from this, because that's why we're doing this.
Awesome. Thank you for doing it. Yes.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Well, look forward to speaking with you and seeing you guys all in March.
Have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
We're not staying, are we? I don't know.